All right, so lots of RNA viruses that cause disease. And again, this is still not every single RNA virus out there. These are the most common ones that you are most likely to encounter. That doesn't mean you won't have patients that have traveled somewhere that might have some rarer ones that aren't on this list. There are other ones out there. Again, all of their genetics, their whole genome is RNA, hence why they're in this whole chapter all together. We group them based on their RNA structure. And when I talk, I'm like, well, yeah, they all have RNA. Well, is it one single strand of RNA? Is it segmented RNA? Do they have an envelope or not? We also group them based on the size of the virus, what is the shape of the capsid. So we kind of look at all this information and then we group them into these different families, hence all my lots of little boxes and sub-boxes. But ultimately, there are 4 major groups or types of RNA viruses. Ones that have single-stranded RNA, but they have the positive side. Again, there's like 2 sides that are opposite of each other. They have the positive side, which that means messenger or the ribosome can read it. It acts like messenger ribosome. There are viruses that have the negative side that are single-stranded RNA. There are double-stranded RNA viruses. And then there's this one group in here. They have positive sense single-stranded RNA. However, they're unique enough is that they can actually take single-stranded RNA and make double-stranded DNA from it. Before, we've talked about how, all right, well, double-stranded DNA turns into messenger RNA, and then it gets read, and makes protein. And you've got transcription. Can't write fast and write neat. And there's translation. Well, there's a group of viruses that have single-stranded RNA, the positive sense strand, which is going to be what messenger RNA ultimately is. But they can do it, and they can take that information and go backwards. It's called reverse transcription, as they can take single-stranded RNA, make double-stranded DNA out of it. So they call that group retroviruses, because the word retro means to go backwards. Oh, you guys have this, but not in color. And we are going to start at the very, very top with the blue, with the naked positive sense single-stranded RNA. You know, it's like everything on this side has positive sense single-stranded RNA. Some of them can do reverse transcription. But we're going to start with the ones that don't have the envelope. And so we've got 3 major groups, the first group being the biggest group. There you go. So because there are so many in this blue group, that very top area, and to know we're still in that blue group, I like to divide it out because it's like this group subdivided more and more groups. So everything in that blue shaded color was naked, no envelope, positive sense single-stranded RNA. And the biggest group was the Picornaviridae group. I'll spell it wrong if I don't look. But there's also groups that we're going to talk about, the Cheliciviridae. Sorry if I spell them wrong from up there. Astroviridae. And then the HEPA. Now, the Picornaviridae group, that top left box, is by far the biggest group. There are a ton of human diseases in this group. So they get like a subfamily. There's a rhinovirus subfamily, an enterovirus, and an hepatovirus. And there are so many enteroviruses. How are enteroviruses, based on the name, most likely spread? There's in fecal oral. So a lot of these are viruses found in fecal matter, and there's a lot of them. So I'm going to even add under that. I'm like, so there's a lot of viruses in this Picornaviridae family. Now, they're mostly grouped, not just because they've got that naked positive sense single-stranded RNA. They're partially all grouped together is because of their size. The word pico means small. These are some of the smallest viruses that cause human disease. And I always remember a pico, that stands for small, is the piccolo. The instrument means small flute. So I'm like, it's just the tiny version of the regular size flute is because pico means small. The cheliciviridae, astroviridae, and hepaviridae, they again still are all positive sin single-stranded RNA. They still do not have a envelope on it. They're grouped because they're larger, so they don't get grouped into the picornaviridae. And most of them, not all, but most of them cause GI issues. So the very first virus subfamily under the picornaviridae are the rhinoviruses. Now, when you hear the word rhino, what do you think of? A rhino, the rhinoceros. And what's unique about a rhinoceros? It has the big, huge horn. The word rhino means nose. That's what it's officially like Latin or Greek for. Means nose. And so the rhinoceros, and it's because it's got that big horn on its nose, the viruses that are in there, because again, there's multiple strains that are all slightly genetically different, the rhinoviruses usually affect the upper respiratory tract, aka the nose. They have a very low infectious dose. So it just means one virus gets in the body, you're going to have a cold. These are one of the biggest groups of viruses that causes the common cold. They are usually spread in like aerosols, so sneezing, coughing, which then is one of the symptoms of it. So again, the virus is causing the symptoms that allow the virus to then spread. It can be spread person-to-person contact, so if you're coughing, sneezing on your hands and then shake someone's hands, again, it's supposed to get into their body, so they touch their eyes, they touch their mucous membrane, the nose, finds that portal of entry. And there are lots of strains of rhinoviruses. What's good for us is that every time you get a rhinovirus, you do actually develop immunity to it. But there are so many strains of rhinoviruses, and there are other groups of viruses that can cause the common cold as well. But what's nice is, as you get older, you do get less colds. Kids, they seem to literally have a runny nose like every day, every week, every month of the year. But as they get older, they are developing immunity. You do get less and less colds every year. Now, one of the reasons why it does affect the nose, it does seem to grow best in a cooler environment. So it likes that little bit of cooler temperature inside the nose. I can't remember if this is on another slide or not. Not really. One of the studies they did is that when people started wearing masks after COVID, we noticed people got a lot less sick. And yes, it's partly because you're not spreading stuff, you're isolating, you're not spreading COVID, but you're also not spreading other things. But one of the things they noticed is because the rhinovirus does like a cooler temperature, when you wear a mask that actually kept inside the nose warmer, that it made this virus not happily as grow, that people actually did have less colds, not because they didn't pick up the virus, but because of wearing that mask. It made it not such a happy place. It wasn't reproducing as quickly. It was like a nice benefit. Diagnosing it is generally just based on symptoms. I don't know how many people go in and get diagnosed for a cold because they're just going to ask you, oh, what are your symptoms? Oh, runny nose, sneezing, coughing. It affects the upper respiratory tract. And partly you don't go in because there's really nothing they can do for that. So we do have, I shouldn't say that, nothing. We do have a couple antivirals that if given right at the onset of symptoms can shorten how long you have the cold. Otherwise, you're just relieving symptoms. Oh, you have a cough? We'll take some over-the-counter cough medicine. You know, you got a runny nose? Well, there's some Kleenex and maybe some decongestant. Best way to prevent getting a rhinovirus, hand washing is going to be the top way to prevent it. The enteroviruses, again, they're still in the Picornaviridae family. There's like their own subfamily. They're all grouped because they're spread fecal-oral. Once they get in the body, they spread into the blood tissue and they can kill their host, as a lot of viruses do, but not all. Again, there are lots of enteroviruses that cause human disease. Oh, I have a polio t-shirt. I should have worn that today. It's like my one semester. The three main enteroviruses that we're going to talk about are the polioviruses, the Coxsackie virus, it's just a weird name all in itself, and the echo. This is why I do my thing, because it's like, these fit into this, which fits into this. It's like lots of little virus subfamilies. You're most familiar with, at least hearing about, are the polio viruses. The polio virus is the disease, poliomyelitis. Anything that has that MY on it means muscles, because it does affect the muscles. We shortened it to generally just call it polio instead of just calling poliomyelitis. Now, I have the date 1979 because we did vaccinate really well that in 1979 used to be the last case in the United States of polio. It's not anymore. But it's one of those, this is why I'm like, textbook get updated all the time. We now have cases of polio back here in the United States. We never eradicated polio like we eradicated smallpox. We almost did. But we still have polio around. Now, if you pick up this virus, again, it's fecal oral. Kids are the dirtiest group of individuals. They were the ones most likely to spread it and develop polio and pick it up. You had one of 4 choices of what kind of symptoms or conditions you developed when you picked up the virus. The majority of people that got it were asymptomatic. Like when I say majority, like 85% of people that picked up this virus were asymptomatic. But why is that so troublesome? Because they're spreading it, not even realizing they really should be isolating. Which again, kids are the biggest group that were spreading it. They're still going to daycare. They're still not washing hands very well, and they're spreading it. 10-ish, I don't care about numbers, but I'm like about 10-ish% develop something known as minor polio, which is your basic cold flu-like symptoms. You're tired, you're fatigued, you may have a fever. And you're still not even going to go to the doctor for it because you just think you've got some type of cold or flu. About 5-ish, again, still lower number, develop what's known as non-paralytic polio. It was all the minor polio symptoms, your typical flu cold-like symptoms with muscle twitching, possible muscle weakness. Meaning you had symptoms of cold flu, but there was some effect on your muscles. And then less than 5%, which you're like, well, that's pretty good odds, but you think about how many thousands of people got polio, it's still a big number, developed paralytic polio. That means this virus targeted and grew and pretty much destroyed the ability for skeletal muscles to contract, hence paralytic. Now, it was not a permanent paralysis. It means eventually people could rebound and skeletal muscles could contract again. But the problem is our diaphragm is a skeletal muscle. And if your diaphragm can't contract, what happens? You can't breathe, and then what happens? And you die. And I'm like, it's a very deadly virus. Now, to try to save people while they were trying to recover, and again, kids were the biggest spreaders, kids were the ones that had the most cases, is they would put individuals into these big tubes called an iron lung. Your head stuck out, and that was it. And then it was still sealed up around your neck. And essentially, that iron lung did what your diaphragm was supposed to do. The only reason air goes in and out of your lungs is pressure difference. As you create more space, which is less pressure, air goes in. You create less space as it goes up, it's more pressure, air goes out. It's just a pressure difference, air goes in and out. Well, the actual tube did that. Air pressure would build up inside the tube, which would push down on your body and cause air to go out. And then that air pressure would decrease, and then air would go in because it would cause your lungs to inflate. And I'm like, it just was fluctuating the air pressure inside the tube, which caused air to go in and out of the lungs. Again, you had to stay there. They give you a little mirror so you can kind of see what's going on. And you usually lived in there for a few weeks, maybe even months, until hopefully your body recovered enough that it could breathe on its own again. But we went through a lot of iron lungs. So lots of kids didn't survive. And if you did survive, I was going to say, this is just showing. I was going to say, here's another picture of an iron lung without an individual sticking out of it. And the number of cases of polio. We have less and less, but they're coming back. Oh, I want to get back to that. Even if you survived polio, you're like, oh, I survived it. Yes, you didn't come away unscathed. Later on in your life, decades later, you develop something known as post-polio syndrome, which means any skeletal muscles that were affected when you were a kid start to deteriorate as you get older. Now, as many of you might be working in nursing homes or even in hospital settings where you have elderly patients, they are most likely had polio when they were kids. And they're walking with a cane if they're able to do that. Or they're in wheelchairs. And it's because those skeletal muscles have deteriorated enough they can no longer walk on their own anymore. Now, 2 vaccines came on the market. Jonas Salk was the one, I can't remember the exact date, that was on my little notes, and that's at home. It's like 55, something like that, 1955. Came out with the first polio vaccine, an inactivated one, so it's not a live virus that they modified. And it was still super effective. I don't know the exact number. Still super effective. He's famous for it. He's got his own Salk Institute and everything for it. Parents lined up around blocks to get vaccinated, get their kids vaccinated. Because again, 5%, and if you think hundreds of kids, and just how many kids live in this La Crosse area, 5% developed paralytic polio. I'm like, that's still a big number. And I'm like, so parents were lining up to get their kids vaccinated, and our number of cases nosedived. Albert Sabin, I think it was like early, like 61, 62, something like that, came out with an oral polio vaccine. Now, what's the benefit of an oral polio vaccine versus the other one, if you're giving it to kids? Yeah, kids don't like shots. I mean, kids are not happy, like, yes, Mom, please line me up in this long line to get a shot. And so it was like, all right, well, let's make one that's a little more kid-friendly. Oral polio vaccine was a live attenuated vaccine. It is more effective because although it can't cause polio, it's still a live virus, so it has a stronger immune system response. However, I can't remember the years though. It was, I think, early 2000s, maybe in the 90s. Over in Europe, there was a whole batch of the oral polio vaccine, the live attenuated virus, that mutated. And then everyone that got the live attenuated virus actually developed polio from the vaccine. It's rare that something can mutate and it go right back to the original infectious form. Because of that, we do not in the United States give out the live oral polio vaccine because even the slightest risk, why risk it? So we always give out, I think it's even listed as like IP for inactivated polio when we list the vaccines. So I'm like, we don't give it. It still is given because again, it does have a better response. We just don't give it. Here's my little note that yes, 2022, we had our first case of polio after 3 decades that we thought United States here, we eradicated it. It's back. New York over on the East Coast seems to be where we're seeing it. Again, even though we've had cases over there, that doesn't mean those are the diagnosed cases. And a lot of people are asymptomatic and don't realize they're spreading it. One way that we are tracking various viruses to know where they are is we track sewage. We are testing water treatment facilities for viruses. These things are spread fecal oral, which means if the virus is in fecal matter, we can find it. That's not going to tell us which household it came from, but we can start to track to see what communities are carrying certain viruses. Now, other enteroviruses, the Coxsackie and the echoviruses. So there are 2 different groups of Coxsackie A viruses. So there's Coxsackie A and Coxsackie B. Coxsackie A is much more common. The viruses in the Coxsackie A group cause lesions and fevers. So skin lesions and fevers. If you get a lesion around the mouth, it's called herpangina. And if you get a lesion around the mouth, what do you probably think you have? You probably think you have a cold sore, which is caused by herpes, simplex 1, or human herpes virus 1. But it's not. It's a completely different virus. That's a DNA virus. This is an RNA virus. And so herpangina is lesions around the mouth that resemble herpes, but it's not herpes. Hand, foot, and mouth disease. If you're a parent, this thing hits daycares all the time. Again, fecal oral spread. So very, very common in daycare settings. Did I hit record? Yeah, okay. I don't even know why I thought of it, and I'm like, did I hit record? Other strains of Coxsackie viruses can cause acute hemorrhagic conjunctivitis, which sounds real bad, but what is it? Pink eye. Again, there are other viruses that can cause pink eye too. Biggest difference, viral pink eye is not going to get the gunkies, and we don't have any antiviral, anything you can do for it, is you have a cold. Some of the strains of Coxsackie virus also cause common colds. Lots of viruses cause the common cold type symptoms. B viruses, again, they're still in the same group, but these generally affect the heart. So they can cause myocarditis and pericardial infections. I was going to say she's a coworker, but she absolutely thought she was having a heart attack. Ton of pain in the heart, lots of pressure in the heart. Went in, and they're just like, oh no, you just have a mild case of myocarditis. It's just caused by like a cold type virus. She had a Coxsackie B virus. She thought she was having a heart attack because, again, it's causing inflammation of the heart and a pressure around there. It's just like a cold that also targets the heart. It went away, totally fine, no side effects after that. Strains of both A and B can get into the meninges and into the cerebrospinal fluid and cause meningitis. Rarer. Usually the highest number of cases that we see is the herpangina, which again, people think they have herpes and it's not a herpes strain, and hand, foot, and mouth disease, some common colds. Echoviruses, they're again still fecal oral, biggest group of individuals that spread it, still kids. I don't know why that stupid thing is on the bottom down here. But it can cause meningitis, otherwise more common cold symptoms. Again, kids are sick with a lot of common colds. Swear they just have a constant runny nose at daycare settings. It could be a Coxsackie virus. It could be an echovirus. It could be a rhinovirus. It could be an adenovirus. Like there's lots of viruses that can cause the common cold. What did I do now? I did something. Sorry guys, hold on. There we go. Now, generally, enteroviruses, we don't diagnose unless they're severe cases. Again, a lot of common colds. I mean, if you go in and say, like, yeah, your kid's got hand, foot, and mouth disease, still really nothing they give them for it. So a lot of people don't get diagnosed unless it's serious. Polio, you would get diagnosed. Again, there's not very many cases of polio around here, but you would. And again, we don't go in and get diagnosed because really we don't have any effective routine antiviral treatment. Your best bet is just to not get it. Good hygiene, and because it's spread fecal oral, I mean, good hygiene, wash hands. Adequate sewage treatment. And then the polio, we do have a polio vaccine that is still routinely given if you vaccinate. Virus that's still in the coronavirus, still that top box, really big box, is the hepatovirus. Again, there are 5 hepatitises, A, B, C, D, and E. The DNA virus was hepatitis B. Now we're into all the other ones are RNA viruses, hepatitis A. It can survive on surfaces for long periods of time, sometimes up to a week or more. It's resistant to a lot of disinfectants. So you're going to need stronger disinfectants like bleach. Your basic Lysol will potentially not kill this. It is usually spread fecal oral. It's really the only hepatitis that's spread fecal oral. The rest are all blood. Symptoms. Well, it is causing inflammation of the liver, so you're going to have abdominal pain in your right upper quadrant. If it's bad enough, it'll lead to jaundice. Otherwise, it's all your basic immune system type symptoms. You're going to be fatigued, fever. It generally does not cause any chronic liver disease, and most people recover just fine. But anytime you do any kind of chronic inflammation of any body organ, it does put you at an increased risk of cancer developing, because chronic inflammation can cause mutations. But usually most recover. But we can avoid it altogether. We do have a hepatitis A vaccine series. One of the biggest groups of individuals that seems to spread hepatitis A are homeless. They're not washing their hands very well. They probably are not vaccinated. It causes a lot of outbreaks in that particular group. Because it is also spread fecal-oral, it's really the one hepatitis that causes food recalls. So if you ever hear of food recalls for hepatitis, it's not because it's in blood and that's in your food, it's because it's a fecal-oral hepatitis. I was going to say, that was one. Strawberries. Again, there are 5 hepatitises that we will cover. We did hepatitis B last class because it's the only one that has DNA. The other ones are all RNA. Most of them are positive sense single-strand RNA, but one's the negative strand. So we're done with that first big blue box, but we're still in the blue boxes. Our next group, the Cheliciviridae and the Astroviridae, we usually talk about them together because they generally cause the same type of disease. GI issues. Okay, lots of diarrhea, maybe some vomiting. So the Calicivirus family, there are lots of virus strains in here. The most commonly known one are noroviruses. They cause diarrhea, vomiting, and nausea. They're nicknamed the cruise ship virus because it was not uncommon for cruise ships. All it takes is one person to board that cruise ship. They're spread fecal-oral, but the problem is they can go airborne as well. If you're vomiting, the virus can go airborne. If you have diarrhea, the virus can go airborne, and it has a very low infectious dose. So if you're around someone that has this, you are likely to pick it up. And it's not exactly how you want to spend a cruise. If you're on a cruise for 5 days, you don't want to be spending in the bathroom with diarrhea and vomiting for 2 of those. It's usually like 48 hours. It also, I know, although it's known for the cruise ship virus, this hits nursing homes real bad too, that they'll go into isolations, and isolating everyone and extra precautions. Astroviruses also affect the GI. It generally just doesn't cause the vomiting. It's usually just lots of diarrhea. So biggest outbreaks, daycare, schools, hospitals, nursing homes. Treatment. We don't do antivirals, it's just replace the fluids and electrolytes, and you're not going to be happy for about 48 hours. Best prevention, sewage treatment, good hygiene, disinfecting surfaces. This hit my family. It was like 2 Christmases ago. We call it the worst Christmas ever because it was literally like one person had it and then the next person had it. It was just like it was going airborne. I somehow avoided it. But it was just like, it was like 12 hours later, someone else would get it, and then another 12 hours later, someone else was getting it. It's in the house. And it goes airborne, super low infectious dose. Not how we wanted to spend our Christmas. Lots and lots of cases. The last little group, still our last one in the blue that's naked, positive sense single-stranded RNA, and is the HEPA virus. And it's got that HEPA in its name is because it's another virus that causes hepatitis, specifically hepatitis E. It is an enteric hepatitis, so it can get spread fecal-oral. It's rare, and it doesn't behave like the other hepatitis do, like hepatitis A. Because for most individuals, it's asymptomatic. The only group that it seems to target and cause issues is pregnant women. It's fatal in 20% of pregnant women. And we don't have a vaccine for it. Now, the why does a pregnant target women? The additional hormones in pregnant women makes this virus reproduce that much faster and cause that much more damage. Again, we're fortunate because it's still very rare, but it still exists. I haven't heard of cases, knock on wood, of any around here. Otherwise, we don't have any antivirals to treat it. It's rest, fluids, treating your basic symptoms. Best prevention, good hygiene, sewage treatment. Just wash hands. Wash hands. So much hand washing. But now we're going to move on to the enveloped, still positive sense single-stranded RNA, so still mimicking messenger RNA. But these have envelopes, and they're all in my yellow. There's less of them. There's the Togaviridae and Flaviviridae. We group them together mostly because of their capsid shape. They have an icosahedral capsid, so a geometric shape. And a lot of viruses that are in this group are considered arboviruses. And what an arbovirus means is that it is spread by insects. It's spread by arthropods, mosquitoes, ticks, fleas, flies. You name it, if it's an insect that can bite us, it can be a carrier of different kinds of viruses. The other virus that's in this group of enveloped positive sense single-stranded RNA is the Coronaviridae, which until 2020, we didn't talk too much about. And I'm like, there's a lot of coronaviruses out there, but it wasn't until COVID-19 that we really even recognized the word corona virus. Now, arboviruses, I said already, they're spread by insects. So ticks and mosquitoes seem to be the top carriers. Depending on which virus, because there are a lot of viruses that are in the Togaviridae and the Flaviviridae group, most of them cause mild flu-like symptoms, tired, achy, fever. Some of them can be more severe, but generally when we're talking about virus infection spread by mosquitoes, it's usually not the first time you get bitten by an infected mosquito or insect that you suffer the worst. Normally, the first time you get bitten by an insect, mild flu-like symptoms, you're not happy, not feeling great, but they can all lead to second stage infections, which means the second time you get bitten by an insect with that same virus, after you've already seen it before and your immune system has seen it before, it can develop more extreme diseases. So they're called second stage infections because it's the second time you've been infected. It can cause encephalitis, so inflammation of the brain. It can cause dengue fever and yellow fever. Again, dengue fever and yellow fever, their own viruses. It's not the first time you get bitten by an infected mosquito that it causes you issues. It's the second time. And again, it's because your immune system has antibodies. And normally that's a good thing, but sometimes those antibodies get a little too overly active when they recognize the thing they're supposed to recognize, and it causes your immune system to go hyperactive, and it will secrete inflammatory responses, causing you to develop a higher extreme fever, worse symptoms that actually can be deadly. It's your immune system that can cause damage. West Nile virus, we do have around here, is also in this group. It's spread by insects. West Nile virus, we didn't used to have it. It used to be over in Europe somewhere. It's usually commonly found in horses and birds. We pick it up when a mosquito bites them and then bites us. But again, birds migrate, so eventually we had birds that brought it over to the United States. We do have cases in Wisconsin. It's been a while, knock on some wood, that I've heard of a case personally, but I've known people that have had this. I know I had a student once whose mom had gotten it and was hospitalized for it. Again, usually mild flu-like symptoms, but because that secondary infection can cause encephalitis, it caused her to be hospitalized. She recovered, but it's one of the reasons when we get into summer months, mosquitoes are so annoying, but it's one of the reasons why the CDC is tracking birds. If all of a sudden they notice a lot of birds dying, their biggest concern is it's this virus, because this virus can kill birds as well. It can kill horses too. Those seem to be the two totally unrelated animals that it's concentrated in. But if they start to notice a lot of birds dying, that's just, I don't know why all these dead birds are around, unexplained, they will start testing for West Nile virus.
What's the difference between the bird flu and this? Because bird flu kills birds too.
It can, but we're actually not even concerned about the fact that it kills birds. It's the fact that the bird flu, they're different strains. The bird flu seems to fuse to some of human flu viruses, and then it affects us as a whole new virus. This is just a virus that doesn't mix DNA and causes similar signs and symptoms, but it's how they react. Makes the bird flu more infectious because it fuses with human flus. So this is just showing cases of West Nile virus in the United States. It's around, we have cases around here. I don't know what year this is because I'm like, I know we've had cases more than that in Wisconsin and around here. It's around. Here was West Nile, here we go. 2016 to 2020, it's around. Again, it's not high numbers of cases. In your careers, you'll probably have people that have had this. Now, it's that secondary response that I said, those secondary infections. Again, if you were infected with, bitten by a mosquito, that virus gets into your cells like it's supposed to, your body reacts, it makes antibodies, and you would normally think, okay, all is well, we made antibodies. The second time you get bitten by an infected mosquito, those antibodies do what they're supposed to do. They're going to recognize that virus, they're going to attach to it, they're going to show it to our immune system cells to be, look what I found, do something with it. It activates those immune system cells, and those immune system cells go a little extra crazy. It's those immune system cells that were just told to do something about it start to produce inflammatory cytokines, which can cause that extreme fever, shock, hemorrhaging, and even death. It's the immune system that actually kills us. It's the immune system goes a little too hyperactive. So some of the first treatments they're going to do are give you immunosuppressants. It's like, okay, it's your immune system that's killing you. Let's give you some anti-inflammatories. Let's try to suppress your immune system. Now, I found this again is showing a lot of the viruses that are in the Togaviridae and Flaviviridae families. We're not even talking about the Bunny and Rio yet. But just looking, there's so many viruses out there. Again, I'm not talking about all of them. We're talking about ones that are more commonly seen. But do any of them, based on the list of the virus names, stick out to you? Just looking at the virus names. Lacrosse encephalitis. Is that this lacrosse? We made the textbooks, yay! We do have our very own lacrosse encephalitis virus that's spread by mosquitoes. We don't have a lot of cases here in La Crosse, though. We actually find more cases more Tennessee, Kentucky, the Carolinas. But we do have cases around here. Why it's called lacrosse encephalitis is there was a young boy that was bitten by an infected mosquito that did get encephalitis. They identified this virus. It was the first time they ever identified this very specific virus. And because he was from La Crosse, it was named lacrosse encephalitis. It is around. There are cases of lacrosse encephalitis. I don't know if I have to throw a map on here. There are cases of lacrosse encephalitis in Wisconsin, but your highest numbers of cases are if you're going more east in the country. So there are lots of mosquito viruses that are out there. Now, testing these different types of arboviruses, usually it's some type of antibody test. We're looking for the antibody response against them. Treatment is usually just supportive. You've got a fever, take something for the fever. We don't have specific antivirals for treating most of these. Your best bet is prevention. What do you think the top prevention is? Bug spray. I was like, anything to prevent you from getting bitten by these different insects. It's like one of the few things where I can't say, hygiene and hand washing. If they're spread by mosquitoes and they're spread by different insects, your prevention is prevent from getting bitten by these different things. Bug spray, long clothing, light color clothing so you can see them, all of those things. And we do have a few vaccines for some strains. Like we do have a yellow fever vaccine. I'm trying to think if that's the only one I can think we have. So we do have a couple vaccines for some of these different strains, but not routinely given. Now, one of the viruses that's in the group but is not spread by mosquitoes, so they're not all spread by insects, is rubella. It causes the disease known as German measles. That's different than regular measles. And this virus affects the respiratory system. It's generally how it gets in. It's breathed in, respiratory droplets, causes inflammation of the respiratory tract, coughing, sneezing. The virus can spread throughout the body once it gets into the bloodstream, and it causes a widespread rash all over. Children seem to suffer the least complications, kind of like chicken pox. They can still get that widespread rash, but it's more annoying than anything else. Adults, because they do have a stronger immune system, are going to suffer a more extreme disease. Then it can actually get in, it can cause meningitis, encephalitis. It can be deadly. One of the biggest concerns, though, is this is a virus that if pregnant women pick it up, it can affect the fetus. It's been known to cause deafness in infants if mom had it. It can cause other birth defects. And so it's one that they were really making sure, pregnant women getting tested, getting vaccinated, because we do have a vaccine for it. What is this vaccine mixed with? Because it's not its own separate vaccine. There's measles, mumps, and rubella, which is known as German measles. Again, two totally different viruses. And we haven't gotten to measles and mumps yet. This is showing after the vaccine came out, the number of cases of rubella went way down. But we're still seeing, I feel like I should have a more updated one than this. We're still seeing, we have occasional outbreaks. We're still seeing cases that go up. Nope, I don't have a more updated. Again, most individuals recover without any long-lasting issues, unless a pregnant woman has it, then their child will suffer. The next group, still in this yellow group, is hepatitis C. So we've already gone over hepatitis B, DNA virus, hepatitis A, hepatitis C, or hepatitis E, and now hepatitis C. We just haven't done hepatitis D yet. In lab, it was in the video. It causes about 20% of all United States hepatitis cases. Although that percentage is going down. It is spread through bodily secretions. Blood is the top infectious source, but it can get spread during other reproductive secretions. It is still a hepatitis, so it's going to cause inflammation of the liver. It can cause severe liver damage and liver failure, which means it could cause individuals to then require a liver transplant. Because we do have some treatments. That doesn't mean it will make the virus completely go away, but it will suppress the virus to no longer cause symptoms and disease. And it's targeting, there is an enzyme that this particular virus needs when it gets released to assemble, and we have drugs that can stop that. So it's no longer becoming infectious, but you still have it. So that's why I'm like, it's not a treatment that'll go away, and we don't have a vaccine yet, but we're making it less infectious with different treatments that we have. So we're seeing less and less cases. And then the oh-so-favorite group, the coronaviruses. And I think this is my last group that I talk about. I think I recorded. Maybe not. I can't remember anymore. Yeah, I think I did. The coronaviruses. Now, the word corona means crown. It doesn't mean beer. It is not, you have a corona suture that goes right across the top of your head. It's right where you would wear a crown. It's named for that because it has these little protein spikes on the outside, but they say it's its crown around the whole outside of the virus itself, those little protein spikes. The viruses in this group, and there are a lot of them, are spread through respiratory droplets, and they affect the respiratory system. Some of them cause common colds, And generally up until 2020, that's about all we really talked. We talked about some of the more extreme ones, but most of them cause the common colds that are in this family. Again, lots of different strains cause lots of different things. Because they affect the respiratory tract, different strains caused more severe signs and symptoms. And so before COVID-19, there was one strain that caused the condition known as SARS, or severe acute respiratory syndrome. SARS. And again, it caused respiratory distress, fever, body aches. Again, respiratory distress means your respiratory system is not doing what it's supposed to do. It's not getting the correct oxygen exchange. It's not getting enough oxygen in, enough carbon dioxide out. You're in respiratory distress. Now, there was a strain of like the SARS that hit China in the 90s. It was really the first time that we actually were seeing in the news, like people were isolating, people wearing masks anytime anyone went out in China, masks. And it was just like, oh my goodness, Chinese, and they're wearing masks. Well, 2020 came around, and a new strain, again, slightly different strains, a new strain of coronavirus, that COVID-19, that first strain, severe acute respiratory type syndrome. It caused respiratory distress. The viruses in this group are all affecting the respiratory system. Depending on which strains, depends on how bad that respiratory distress was. And it became very, very deadly, especially because we didn't know how it was spreading, and we didn't know how to treat it, and we didn't have any vaccine yet. There was another strain too that causes very deadly respiratory distress that's found in the Middle East, called the Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome, known as MERS. Less cases, still there. Now, I want to say no treatment, no vaccine. We do have vaccines for the COVID-19 strains. But as we know, what happens to this particular virus? What does it keep doing? It keeps mutating, it keeps changing. And every time it changes, that vaccine is not as effective. Doesn't mean it's completely ineffective. It just means it's not as effective. The whole thing doesn't change. So your immune system recognizes part of the virus, but it doesn't recognize like all of the virus. So it will have some response a little bit quicker, but it's not going to be a nice, accurate, I know exactly what to do. Treatment, we also do have, as I said, no treatment vaccines for most strains. COVID-19, we put a lot of money into developing treatments and vaccines. So we do have some for COVID-19 strains. We do have some antivirals that are given, and we do have vaccines, but we keep requiring boosters. I just took my kid in for like a yearly checkup, and the doctor's like, oh, we got a new strain of vaccine coming out, for the newest updated, mutated, that's coming out later this summer. And she's like, so this fall. I'm like, great. Okay. Again, the flu, the part of the influenza is part of the taped part we won't get through today. Same thing. Not all viruses keep mutating as quickly as other ones. Coronaviruses do. And they keep mutating, which makes those vaccines not as effective, and we have to keep developing new ones. That is as far as I'm going to go, though, because I recorded everything else, because I wanted some time to talk about what is going on and to hand out